Hello, I'm David Jones, and I thought in this video we're going to take a look at some interesting commodity markets. Now, I think these tend to get overlooked by people because we tend to stick to the stuff that we're used to, oil, gold, S&P, NASDAQ, pound against the dollar. But if you saw the video I did last week, 2025 Outlook, you know, that last year did see some quite big moves for some commodities. Coffee, orange juice, cocoa, all had good years. And from a longer term point of view, I think there are some really interesting trends in these markets. So in today's video, what we're going to do, we're going to take a look at a mix of what I think are interesting commodities for the year ahead from a longer term trend point of view. There's a couple that I think are really hot right now, so we'll have a look at those as well. I'll talk a bit later in the video about a session I'm running next week for longer term trading of markets with this sort of thing in mind. So I'll talk about that later on in the video and how you can join if you want to. But for now, without further ado, let's get into it and take a look at some of these commodity markets. So let's take a look at some of these commodity markets. I'm starting off by looking at palladium. Not that I think it's that interesting a market at the moment, but I started trading more longer term positions in commodities back in about 2018, 2019. And palladium was one that really stuck with me from back then. I had some really good trades in this market because, of course, it was such a great trending market at the time. Let me zoom in. It's been a bit different since then. And this is what has made me want to focus more again on this year. You know, look at palladium in August 2018 was about 850, 860, and then got as high as 2,800. So more than, what's that, tripled? Pretty much tripled over a couple of years. And it was a really good trend. Obviously, there's some sideways stuff along the way, but some really good moves, like this move from August 19 into Feb 2020. And for me, I found it a good trend to trade. And also it gave me the opportunity to add to positions as the trend went in my favor. So I remember, you know, palladium 2018, 2019 being a big winner for me. It's not something that appeals to me at the moment. I mean, it's been pretty much in reverse since Feb 22. It had that run up Feb, March 22, and then the price has just dumped since then, and it's holding above these old lows. So not much interest for me in that at the moment. But I thought I'd tell a bit of a story as to what, you know, how I've traded these commodities in the past and why I want to do more of this more longer term stuff this year. Let's take a look at another one. So this is one that will be familiar, I think, to quite a few people. You know, natural gas it's not a mainstream market, but it has definitely become a popular market over the last few years because of the volatility. You know, I always refer to it as a crazy market in the WhatsApp group that I run because it is nuts. But, you know, coming into 2025, it's had a big move in natural gas since October last year. So I thought, well, I wonder what happens with natural gas this year. You know, if we go back to 2024, there were loads of swings throughout the year, but overall it went sideways. And then towards the end of the year, it started breaking out. You know, we had the price of natural gas traded up. How high did it get? So this would have been, when was that? Right at the end of 2024, 30th of December. So it traded back up to levels not seen since Jan 2023. So nearly a 2-year high at the end of December. So I think that's an interesting market to watch this year. You know, we all know natural gas can go nuts. Very much, it's the weather again, I think, that's driving it at the moment, with colder weather forecast in the weeks ahead. So that's definitely given it a lift into January 2025. Let's see what the rest of the year looks like. Falling stockpiles in Europe, all sorts of, you know, the usual stuff that we see for some of these energy markets. But it's an interesting one. So at the moment with natural gas, I've got no way of knowing if it's going to go back up to $10. You know, it's trading at $3.77 at the moment at the time of recording, but we've got a definite trend in place. So I think that's an interesting market for this year. I mean, it is a crazy volatile one. You know, if you look at the lows from December, we're around about 285, and it traded up to 445. You know, so that's it's a pretty major swing. It's like an 80% move, 70 to 80% move in the space of a month. So it is nuts. You know, if I trade it, I always trade it with quite wide stops. I think if it did start to dip, it would be interesting. But overall, that trend that's been in place since November is still going. Now, what a market this next one was in 2024. So I'm talking about the price of cocoa. So about a year ago, cocoa was trading at 4,200. And by April, so what was that? 3.5 months into the year, it was trading at 12,200. So the price had, again, what's that? Not quite tripled, but almost tripled in about 3.5 months. Massive move in cocoa. It had been in an uptrend anyway. It was trending higher. So it shows how, I think, going with the trend in these longer term trades can sometimes end up with nice surprises in the direction of the trend when the trend really goes ballistic, which is what cocoa did. Anyway, so we had that move into the April highs. And then for much of 2024, it was all a bit sideways. The old lows from May held just below 7,000. But at the end of the year, it started to get interesting again. So again, we're coming into 2025, or we're in 2025. We had cocoa hit all-time highs mid-December, taking out those old highs. Lots of volatility since then again. In less than a month, we've seen the market go as high as 14,000, as low as 10,500. So we've seen, what's that, a 23% swing in the price of cocoa just over the last few weeks or so. But I think it's an interesting market. Is this a false break? Is this the start of a new trend higher in 2025? Nobody knows. There's no definite way of telling if something's a false break or a real break. But I think it's an interesting market. So for now, this is another one that I'd probably think about being a buyer of. When it comes to stop losses, again, if I'm trading these off medium term, off daily charts, I want to give the market time to move. So for me, if I was trading cocoa, I'd want my stop the other side of 9,700 down there, which is almost halfway down that range, which is a good place for a finger in the air stop. But I think perhaps that's an interesting market to watch in 2025. Another market with good trends over the last year and sort of 3 or 4 months is the price of coffee. This is coffee, hold on, I always get mixed up. Is it Robusta or is it Arabica? This is coffee Arabica. So there's a couple of different types of mainstream coffee to trade. So the price of coffee coming into 2024 was trading around 188, 190, traded as high as 340 in December, and that trend is still up. We had, I think it was poor weather affected crops in Brazil and Vietnam for coffee. So again, it's a supply and demand thing. If we've got less than expected return from the fields, it's going to affect the price of coffee in the market, and that's what we saw. That's what we've seen for coffee. So it's a market, again, I think is at all-time highs in late 2024. The trend for coffee is still up. I'd be a buyer of the dip. Again, it can be a volatile market. It can have fairly steady times, fairly steady trends, and then we get, some of these crazy moves. So for me, if we did see the price of coffee dip, I'd be interested in being a buyer. We've got a lot of support around about ahead of 240. Those lows from November, the trend line from sort of October 2023. So I think that's an interesting market. The last two markets I'm going to look at, for me, at the time of recording, these are the two, let's call them the two hottest markets for me, right? So we're going to have a look at these now. Before we do that, I'm going to talk about a special event that I'm doing in a week's time. So I'll talk about that. You can attend that if you'd like to, and then we'll come back and look at these next two markets. Right, quick break, just to talk about some of the other things I do, and this session I'm doing in a week's time, more specifically. So Thursday, the 16th of January, I think I'm going to run a webinar. I run regular webinars for the WhatsApp group that I run, and I'm running a webinar on longer term trading. So the sort of thing we've been talking about today. It's something I did a lot of 5 or 6 years ago. And for those of you who've done my trading course, it was the thing that really sparked off the trading course, looking at the longer term trends. One of the things I like about longer term trading, I think we all come into trading thinking it's all about the really short term. But with the longer term stuff, you don't need to watch the markets during the day. I look at, for long term trades, look at markets perhaps twice a week, you're in for the bigger move, so you're not that bothered about the day-to-day fluctuations. And I think for a lot of people, me included, it's a more relaxed and potentially more profitable approach to trading, because you're not getting knocked out in the short-term noise, which I'm sure is a frustration that many of us have experienced in the past. So anyway, I'm doing this session on Thursday, the 16th of January, on longer term trading. It's a webinar. I'm running it for the WhatsApp group. There's a couple of ways you can attend if you want to. You can either join the WhatsApp group by going to the website davidjonestrading.co.uk, use the code YouTube and you get 20% off the first month. It's only a month by month commitment anyway, so you'll be invited, and on top of that you get the regular daily updates from me, outlook on markets, what I'm trading, all of that sort of stuff. There are people who've been in the WhatsApp group now for more than a year, so they like it. You can try it and get access to this webinar. The other way of getting access to the webinar is open an account to try my preferred broker. I've been trading with these guys for a couple of years, no hesitation in recommending them. Tight spreads, wide range of markets. You can link it all into TradingView, which is something I do, so you can see the positions on the charts, and you can trade really small, which again I think is useful for longer term trades where you're having wide stops, and if you're trying out a new trading approach. So if you go to bit.ly/DavidTrade, you can open an account with them, drop me an email when you've done either of these things, and I'll make sure that you're added in to the webinar on Thursday the 16th of January. My email address is dj@davidjonestrading.co.uk. Right, that's it. There's a couple more markets to look at. I think it's the hot ones coming up next, so let's take a look. Right, let's look at these two markets that I am interested in at the moment. The first of these is live cattle. I have traded this in the past. You can see going back, I've only got data here going back to 2021, but you can see it was a great trend in live cattle. So it went from whatever, 115 to as high as 185 by September 2023. So we had a good trend there. And then it all sort of stalled, since 2023. We've had these moves, like a little breakout there in March 24, nothing came of it. A little breakout there, July 24, nothing. Again, the old highs tested October 24. So all a bit boring during 2024, just kept knocking its head up against these highs, ahead of sort of 190. But things have been different. In the last 3 weeks or so, we've seen the price of cattle trade through this level, trade through, breakout again in December, sells off, and we've actually had a follow through, so it looks like, and again, we don't know if it's a real break or a false break, only with hindsight, but I think it's interesting, a market that had been going pretty much sideways for much of the last 9 months is starting this year showing quite different price action. So for me, it's an interesting market, so for me, I'd like to be a buyer. If I'm a buyer of cattle at the moment, I'd want to have my stop at least the other side of November lows. So November lows on my chart are around about 182. So I think for me, that's an interesting market, after not being that much of an interesting market, unless you were selling short on the rallies up to the highs. It's going into 2025, breaking a big level, all-time highs, I think, for the price of live cattle. Let's see what happens. But that's a hot market, I think, for me at the moment. And the other one is the price of orange juice. A great trend over recent years, and the trend that we've had since Jan 24, so a year ago, this is almost textbook. If you looked up textbook trend, this would be a great example. I think the trend on the daily charts for orange juice. Again, weather has played its part here in driving the price of orange juice higher. It came into 2024 trading around 318, traded as high as 550. So what's that? Do the maths in my head. 50, 60% rise in 2024. And here's our trend. Hit fresh all-time highs in December, but again, poor production. Poor crops in Brazil, weather playing its part, and also orange production in Florida has been dropping for the last 20 years anyway, dropped 90% or something like that. So, again, it's a bit of a perhaps supply-demand squeeze that we're seeing, no pun intended. But a great trend in orange juice. So for me, if I was a buyer into that trend, you know, we've had the move out to fresh highs, we've had the dip back. If this trend is going to continue, then I'd expect some strength in the weeks and the months ahead. And for me, the closest I want my stop is the other side of these late September, October lows coming in around 458. So I think that's a really interesting market, orange juice. So that's it really. I just thought we'd look at some of these different markets, and particularly because some financial markets have been a little dull over the last few weeks. But you know, commodity markets I think are always interesting from when we're looking at the more, you know, medium term perspective to try and focus and hook in on some big trends. They're not all exciting. You know, there are other markets like, what else should we take a look at? Something like soybeans. I mean, the trend has been down on soybeans going back to Feb 22, and it's just sort of bumbling around these levels here. Sugar might be interesting. Again, this has been a good market for me in the past, some good trends. I did wonder if the downtrend was over in sugar in early September. It sold off again. Do these old lows hold? I think that's an interesting market to keep an eye on. So there's lots out there that do demonstrate potential outside of perhaps the normal NASDAQ, oil, pound against the dollar sort of market. So I thought we'd take a look at some of these, and I'll do an update as the year goes on, how my own trading is going, and then we'll talk about it in that special event, that webinar next week. And any questions, I'll give you my email address in a second and you can send them through. That's it. That's the end of this one on commodities. Really interesting markets, I think. Some great trends over time. Let's see what 2025 looks like. If you'd like to come to the webinar next Thursday evening, it's 7 p.m. I think I'm going to do it UK time. Either join the WhatsApp group, use the code YouTube, and you can be in that for a month anyway, or try out my preferred broker, open an account with them. Either way, if you do either of those, drop them an email and I'll make sure you're on the list. Any questions, you can always send me an email, dj@davidjonestrading.co.uk, and all of the details are in the description to the video. And finally, if it's the first time you've seen any of this stuff, welcome to the channel. Please subscribe, like, and all that YouTube stuff, because it really helps things out. Okay, I'll be back on this Friday for the live stream. I think it's the payrolls this Friday. So until then, good luck with your trading and hopefully see you then.